I sat in my empty apartment staring at my phone after receiving the most devastating call of my life. My mother had just told me the family was going on their annual 2-week Caribbean cruise without me, because my sister Sarah claimed I was an embarrassment to the family name. The words echoed in my mind as I realized I'd been funding their entire lifestyle for 3 years since becoming a successful software engineer, yet they were cutting me out of family memories. My finger hovered over my banking app as rage built inside me like a volcano ready to erupt. The call had ended 20 minutes ago, but I couldn't move from my kitchen counter. My coffee had gone cold, and the Austin morning sun streamed through my apartment windows, illuminating the framed family photos that suddenly felt like mockeries. 3 years. 3 whole years I'd been their financial lifeline, and this was how they repaid me. Let me back up and explain how I became my family's personal ATM. After graduating from University of Texas with a computer science degree, I landed a dream job at a tech startup here in Austin. The salary was more money than I'd ever imagined making at 28 years old. 6 figures, stock options, the whole package. I was finally living the American dream my immigrant grandparents had worked toward their entire lives. But while I was climbing the corporate ladder, my family was falling apart financially. Dad's construction company, which he'd built over 15 years, crashed during the pandemic. The small jobs dried up and the big contracts went to companies with deeper pockets and better connections. Mom had been working part-time at a local boutique, but that closed down when the owner couldn't afford rent anymore. Within 6 months, my parents went from middle-class stability to drowning in debt. Then there was Sarah, my older sister by 2 years, who'd been chasing her acting dreams in Los Angeles since college. Every month brought a new crisis. She needed money for professional headshots acting classes with some guru who promised to make her the next big thing, or rent for her studio apartment in West Hollywood that cost more than most people's monthly salary. Her resume was full of background work and student films, but her bank account was perpetually empty. Being the responsible one had always been my role in the family. While Sarah was the creative free spirit and our older brother Marcus served overseas with the Army, I was the one who got good grades, saved money, and planned for the future. So when my family needed help, I stepped up without hesitation. I started small, $1,000 here to help with Dad's medical bills when he hurt his back on a job site, $500 there to cover Mom's car payment, another $800 to keep Sarah from getting evicted. But small became big, and big became massive. Before I knew it, I was covering their mortgage, both car payments, credit cards, health insurance, utilities, groceries, and sending Sarah a monthly allowance that was more than many people's rent. I set up a family credit card for emergencies. I added them to my cell phone plan. I even started a joint savings account so they'd have a buffer for unexpected expenses. In my mind, I was being generous and responsible, helping my family through a rough patch until they could get back on their feet. The rough patch lasted 3 years and counting. Every month the expenses grew. Dad needed new tools for the few jobs he could find. Mom's car needed repairs. Sarah's career required networking events, new clothes for auditions, and deposits for acting workshops. The emergency credit card was used for everything from groceries to vacation spending. The joint savings account became their personal slush fund. But I didn't mind. Family was everything, right? I worked longer hours, took on freelance projects, and lived in a modest apartment while my family enjoyed a lifestyle I was essentially subsidizing. I told myself this was temporary, that they'd eventually become self-sufficient again, and that supporting them was the right thing to do. The first real crack in my perception came last Christmas. I'd been looking forward to our traditional family gathering for weeks. I'd even taken extra time off work and bought expensive gifts for everyone. 2 days before Christmas Eve, Mom called to tell me they were having a small, intimate dinner, and maybe it would be better if I didn't come. Sarah's going through a really difficult time right now, Mom had explained. She feels judged around you, honey. She says you make comments about money that hurt her feelings. Maybe we should give her some space to heal. I spent Christmas Day alone in my apartment eating takeout Chinese food while paying for their feast. I saw the photos on social media later. The dining room table I'd helped them keep loaded with food I'd essentially purchased, surrounded by my family laughing and enjoying themselves without me. I should have seen the pattern then, but I convinced myself it was just a rough patch for Sarah. Everyone has bad times, and maybe I had been too focused on their finances lately. I resolved to be more supportive and less involved in monitoring how they spent the money I gave them. That resolution lasted until this morning's phone call. Mom had called at 7:30 just as I was getting ready for work. Her voice was bright and excited the way it used to sound when she'd plan our childhood summer trips. "Levi, honey, I have the most wonderful news. We're finally taking that Caribbean cruise we've been talking about for years. 2 full weeks visiting 7 islands. Dad found an amazing deal, and Sarah's so excited she can barely contain herself." I felt genuinely happy for them. After years of financial stress, they deserved a real vacation. "That's fantastic, Mom. When are you going? I should probably request time off work so I can join you guys." The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long, I thought the call had dropped. "Oh, sweetie." Mom finally said, her voice completely different now. Uncomfortable. Guilty. "Well, you see, Sarah felt that maybe this trip should just be for the immediate family. She's been under so much pressure lately, and she really needs this time to reconnect with us without any additional stress." Additional stress. I repeated, not understanding. "She said you've been making her feel bad about accepting help from you, like she's not good enough or something. She called you an embarrassment to the family named Levi. She said you judge everyone and make family time uncomfortable by keeping track of every dollar spent." The words hit me like a physical blow. An embarrassment to the family name. The family name I'd been protecting and supporting for 3 years with my own hard work and sacrifice. "So you're going on a family vacation without me?" I said slowly, trying to process what I was hearing. "It's just this once, honey. Sarah promised things would be different after she has some time to work through her feelings. And really, you're so busy with work anyway. You probably don't even want to take 2 weeks off." That's when the real twist of the knife came. As Mom continued explaining why my sister had convinced them I was an embarrassment who didn't deserve to be included in family memories, I opened my laptop and checked the emergency credit card account. The cruise was already booked and paid for. $11,400 charged to the card I'd given them for true emergencies. They'd used my money to exclude me from the very vacation they were claiming I couldn't afford to join. I was funding my own exile from the family. After Mom hung up with promises to talk more about this later, I sat in my kitchen staring at the credit card statement on my laptop screen. $11,400 for a 14-day cruise to the Caribbean. The booking date was 6 weeks ago, meaning they'd been planning this exclusion for over a month. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was scrolling through 3 years of transactions and finally seeing the pattern I'd been blind to. This wasn't the first time I'd been deliberately excluded while footing the bill. Growing up, I'd always been the middle child in a family that seemed to have clear roles for everyone. Marcus was 4 years older and had enlisted in the Army right after high school. He was the responsible military son who made my parents proud with his service to the country. Sarah was 2 years older than me and had always been the creative dreamer, the one who got away with everything because she was artistic and sensitive. I was the practical one, the one who got straight A's without drama, who saved money from part-time jobs, who never caused problems or needed emotional management. I was reliable, steady, forgettable. My parents never worried about me because I always figured things out on my own. When I graduated high school as valedictorian, the celebration dinner lasted about an hour before the conversation shifted to Sarah's latest audition or Marcus's deployment news. When I got into UT on academic scholarship, Dad patted my shoulder and said, "That's great, son," before launching into a story about Marcus's latest promotion. When I landed my first job out of college, Mom smiled and immediately started talking about how the income could help Sarah get better headshots. I'd thought becoming financially successful would finally earn me the same attention and respect my siblings received. Instead, it just made me useful in a different way. The realization stung, but it was nothing compared to what I discovered next. While looking at our family's shared phone plan to see if they'd tried to call me back, I noticed something odd about the data usage. Sarah and my parents had been sending hundreds of text messages back and forth over the past month, far more than usual. My phone was the primary account holder, which meant I had access to basic usage information for all lines. I'd never used that access before because I respected their privacy, but something about this situation made me dig deeper. What I found made my stomach drop. There were multiple group conversations happening on messaging apps with data spikes that suggested photo and video sharing. The timing aligned perfectly with family events I hadn't been invited to. Christmas dinner, Easter brunch, Dad's birthday celebration last month that I'd only learned about through a Facebook photo Sarah posted 3 days later. I opened my laptop and started going through social media more carefully, looking at timestamps and locations. There, it was laid out like a timeline of my exclusion. Family dinners I wasn't invited to. Shopping trips with Mom and Sarah while I worked extra hours to pay for their spending. A weekend trip to San Antonio for Dad's birthday that I'd funded but wasn't included in. The final piece of the puzzle came when I checked the phone records more thoroughly. There was a group chat that had been active for almost 8 months. The data usage patterns showed it included multiple people sending messages throughout each day. Photos, videos, constant communication. I created a timeline on a spreadsheet, cross-referencing the phone activity with social media posts and my own calendar. The picture that emerged was devastating. My family had been actively planning events and sharing experiences without me for the better part of a year, all while I continued sending money to support their lifestyle. But the worst discovery was still to come. Marcus was supposed to be deployed overseas. At least that's what I'd been told for the past 6 months. Every time I asked Mom about him, she'd get that worried mother expression and say he was somewhere he couldn't talk much, and that communication was limited. I'd sent care packages to an APO address and money to help with his expenses when he was on leave. But according to the phone records, Marcus was not only available but actively participating in the group conversations. His line showed consistent domestic usage patterns, not the sporadic international communications you'd expect from someone deployed overseas. And the data timing suggested he was participating in real-time conversations during normal U.S. business hours. I opened Facebook and did something I'd never done before. I went through Marcus's friends' profiles looking for any photos he might have been tagged in recently. It took 20 minutes of careful searching, but I found what I was looking for. 3 weeks ago, Marcus had been tagged in a photo at a barbecue in our hometown. He was laughing with college friends, clearly stateside, clearly not deployed. The photo had been posted by his high school buddy Jake, who wasn't connected to anyone else in my family on social media. My brother had been home for months. My parents knew, Sarah knew, and nobody had told me. I felt like I was discovering that my entire family was living a parallel life that I was funding, but not welcome to join. Every dollar I'd sent, every bill I'd covered, every sacrifice I'd made to help them through their difficult time had been supporting their exclusion of me from their real lives. The phone rang. Mom's caller ID appeared on my screen. "Hi, honey," she said, her voice artificially bright. "I was thinking maybe we could meet for lunch this weekend and talk through this whole vacation situation. I think there might be some misunderstandings." "Is Marcus deployed right now?" I asked directly. The silence stretched long enough to answer my question. "Well, he's on leave temporarily, but how long has he been on leave?" "Levi, sweetheart, I think you're getting worked up over nothing. Family dynamics are complicated, and..." "How long, Mom?" 3 months, she whispered. "But Sarah thought it would be better if you didn't know right away, because you've been so stressed with work and she didn't want you to feel obligated to..." I hung up. 3 months. My brother had been home for 3 months, and my sister had convinced my parents to keep it a secret from me. The brother I'd been sending care packages and extra money to support during his supposed deployment had been living 20 minutes away from our parents, participating in family events I wasn't invited to. I opened my banking app and looked at the accounts I'd set up for my family's support. Joint savings account, $43,000, mostly from my contributions. Family credit card, $11,000 balance from the cruise, plus $8,000 in other recent charges. Monthly transfers, $4,000 every 30 days to cover their basic expenses. In 3 years, I had provided my family with over $200,000 in direct support, not counting the insurance phone bills and other services I covered. I was funding a family that had systematically excluded me from their lives while pretending I was too busy or too judgmental to be included. The embarrassment wasn't mine. It was theirs, and it was time they learned the difference. I called in sick to work something I'd only done twice in 3 years and spent the morning conducting a thorough audit of my family's finances. What I discovered made me realize just how deep the deception ran. Every bank account, every credit card, every automatic payment told the same story. I wasn't just helping my family through a rough patch. I was subsidizing a lifestyle they'd become completely dependent on while actively working to keep me isolated from the benefits of my own generosity. The numbers were staggering. Sarah's monthly allowance had grown from $500 to $1,800 over the past year. The emergency credit card showed regular charges at high-end restaurants, clothing stores, and entertainment venues. Dad's tool purchases weren't for construction work, but for hobby woodworking projects he'd never mentioned to me. Mom had been getting monthly spa treatments that cost more than many people spent on groceries. But the real revelation came when I looked at their actual income. Dad had been working steady construction jobs for the past year. Not the sporadic low-paying work I'd been told about, but regular employment with a local contractor. Mom had started working full-time at a medical office 6 months ago. Sarah had booked 3 commercial acting jobs in the past 4 months, plus regular background work that provided steady income. They didn't need my money anymore. They wanted it. I spent 2 hours documenting everything before calling my parents back. This time I recorded the conversation. "Levi," Dad answered on the first ring. "Your mother told me you two had a little misunderstanding this morning. Listen, son, family's complicated and... Dad, I need you to be honest with me about something. Do you and Mom actually need my financial support right now?" "Well, of course we appreciate everything you do for us, and we're grateful that ikasfiam." "That's not what I asked. Do you need it? Are you unable to pay your bills without my help?" Another long silence. I could hear Mom in the background whispering urgently. "Levy, the thing is, we've gotten used to a certain standard of living, and it would be very difficult to... So you don't need it. You just want it. Son, there's nothing wrong with family helping family. You've been blessed with success, and sharing that blessing with the people who raised you is... The people who raised me don't include me in family vacations." Dad's tone shifted, becoming defensive. "Now that's not fair. You voluntarily offered to help us financially. Nobody forced you to do anything. And just because you give us money doesn't mean you get to control every aspect of our lives." The words hit me like a slap. "Control every aspect of your lives, Dad. I'm not invited to family dinners. I wasn't told my own brother was home from deployment. My sister calls me an embarrassment and convinces you to exclude me from family memories. How exactly am I controlling anything?" "Sarah has her reasons for feeling the way she does," Mom said, apparently taking the phone from Dad. "She's always felt like you judge her for accepting help, like you think you're better than the rest of us because you make more money. I think I'm better than you." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Mom, I work 60-hour weeks so I can afford to support all of you. I live in a modest apartment while you take luxury cruises. I drive a 5-year-old Honda while Dad buys premium tools for his hobby projects. In what universe does that make me the person who thinks he's better than everyone else?" "You keep track of every penny." Mom snapped, her patience finally cracking. "Sarah showed me how you monitor the credit card account and question expenses. It makes her feel like a child who can't be trusted." She can't be trusted. None of you can. You've been lying to me for months about Marcus being deployed. You planned a family vacation without me using my own money. You've been excluding me from family events while I pay your bills, and somehow I'm the problem. "Lower your voice when you speak to your mother," Dad interrupted, taking the phone back. "Or what you'll exclude me from more family events. Oh wait, you already do that. Levi Robert Harrison, you need to check your attitude right now. We are still your parents and we deserve respect regardless of your financial situation." My financial situation. My financial situation is that I've given you over $200,000 in 3 years while you actively work to keep me out of your lives. My financial situation is that I'm 28 years old with no savings, because I've been supporting a family that considers me an embarrassment. Mom started crying in the background. We never said you were an embarrassment, honey. Sarah said that, and she was upset about something else entirely. What was she upset about? Neither of them answered. What was Sarah upset about? I repeated. Finally, Dad spoke. She saw your LinkedIn post about the promotion at work. She felt like you were showing off and making her feel bad about her own career struggles. I closed my eyes and tried to process what I'd just heard. She was upset because I posted about getting promoted to senior software engineer. She's been having a really hard time with auditions lately, and seeing your success just reminded her of her own struggles. She said it felt like you were rubbing it in her face. Rubbing it in her face by posting about my job on LinkedIn, the job that pays for her apartment, her acting classes, her headshots, and apparently her family vacations. Levi, please, Mom pleaded through her tears. Can't we just work this out? Sarah said she's willing to apologize if you promise to be more sensitive about how your success affects other people. My success affects other people by paying their bills, I said quietly. And apparently by making me unwelcome at family gatherings. That's not fair, Dad said. You're twisting everything around. We love you, son. We're proud of you. But Sarah is struggling right now, and as her parents, we need to support her emotional well-being too. By excluding me from the family. By giving her space to work through her feelings without additional pressure. I'm additional pressure. You have to admit, Levi, you do make comments about money sometimes. Sarah said you questioned why she needed a new headshot when she just got one 6 months ago. That hurt her feelings. I remembered that conversation. Sarah had wanted $800 for headshots with a photographer who charged twice the normal rate. When I'd asked why she needed new ones so soon, she'd accused me of being unsupportive of her dreams. So questioning an $800 expense makes me unsupportive, but planning family vacations without me while using my money is just supporting Sarah's emotional well-being. You're oversimplifying a complex situation, Dad said. No, Dad, I'm finally seeing a simple situation clearly. You want my money, but you don't want me. I hung up and immediately started changing passwords on every account my family had access to. It was time for them to learn the difference between generosity and enabling, between family support and financial manipulation. But first I had one more phone call to make. I dialed Marcus's number. Hey, little brother, he answered cheerfully. What's going on? Where are you right now? What do you mean, geographically? Where are you located at this moment? Another pause. Levi, what's this about? Are you deployed overseas, or are you sitting in your apartment in our hometown lying to me like everyone else in this family? The silence stretched so long I thought he'd hung up. Finally, Marcus sighed deeply. I'm home, he admitted. I've been home for 3 months. And you didn't think I should know that? Sarah said you were really stressed with work and didn't want to add pressure by making you feel like you needed a visit or anything. She said you preferred keeping family stuff simple while you focused on your career. Sarah said. It's always what Sarah said, isn't it? Levi, what's going on? You sound really angry. Did you know about the cruise? What cruise? The 14-day Caribbean cruise Mom and Dad are taking next month. The one I'm not invited to because I'm an embarrassment to the family. What? No, nobody said anything to me about a cruise. And who said you were an embarrassment? I spent 20 minutes bringing Marcus up to speed on everything I'd discovered. The financial manipulation, the systematic exclusion, Sarah's role in poisoning our parents against me. Jesus Christ, Levi, I had no idea. Sarah told me you were too busy with work stuff to hang out much, and Mom and Dad just went along with it. I thought you were choosing to keep your distance. For 3 months, you thought I was choosing to avoid my family. Sarah made it sound like you felt awkward around us because of the money situation. Like you didn't want us to feel bad about accepting help, so you preferred to keep things low-key. And none of you thought to ask me directly how I felt about any of this. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. We should have. I should have. Levi, I'm really sorry, man. I had no idea Sarah was manipulating the situation like this. She's not just manipulating the situation, Marcus. She's destroying our family while I pay the bills for everyone to participate in my own exclusion. What are you going to do? I'm cutting them off, all of them. Every account, every credit card, every automatic payment. They want to exclude me from the family fine, but they don't get to do it with my money. Levi, wait. Don't make any decisions while you're this angry. Maybe we can fix this. Fix what? The fact that our parents chose to believe Sarah's lies over having an honest conversation with me. The fact that they used my money to book a vacation specifically designed to exclude me. Or the fact that you've been home for 3 months and nobody bothered to tell me. Marcus didn't have an answer for that. I'm done being the family ATM for people who consider me too embarrassing to include in family memories, I said. They're about to learn what it feels like to fund their own lifestyle. As I started the process of cutting off their access to my accounts, I realized this wasn't just about money. This was about respect, honesty, and what family actually means. For 3 years, I'd confused financial generosity with love. It was time to find out which one my family actually valued. I spent the next 4 hours systematically dismantling 3 years of financial support. Every joint account, every shared credit card, every automatic payment, every insurance policy. I approached it like a software project, methodically working through each connection until my family's access to my money was completely severed. The emergency credit card was canceled first. The $11,400 cruise charge would stand, but no new expenses could be added. I contacted the credit card company and requested a full transaction history for the past year, officially documenting every purchase for my records. Next came the joint savings account, $43,000, mostly my contributions over the past 3 years. I transferred my portion to a new account at a different bank, leaving them with the roughly $6,000 they'd actually contributed themselves. The family cell phone plan was next. I called the carrier and removed all lines except my own, effective at the end of the current billing cycle. They'd have 3 days to set up their own phone service before losing coverage. Car insurance, health insurance, streaming services, grocery delivery memberships, gym memberships. I'd forgotten I was paying for. One by one, I removed them from every service I'd been covering. The monthly automatic transfers that had been draining $4,000 from my account every 30 days were canceled permanently. By 2 o'clock that afternoon, my family's financial safety net had completely disappeared. My phone started ringing at 2:15. I ignored the first 5 calls from Mom, the 3 from Dad, and the 7 from Sarah. But when Marcus called, I answered. "Levi, what the hell did you do?" he said immediately. "Sarah just called me screaming that all her credit cards are being declined." "I removed my family from accounts that I pay for," I said calmly. "If Sarah's cards are being declined, it's because she was using credit I provided instead of money she earned." "Dude, you can't just cut everyone off without warning. Mom's at the grocery store and her card isn't working. She's freaking out." "Mom has a job, Marcus. She earns a paycheck. She can use her own money to buy groceries. You know they don't have enough saved up to handle this kind of sudden change. Then they shouldn't have spent 3 years building a lifestyle they couldn't afford while excluding me from their lives. Look, I get that you're angry about the cruise thing, but this is extreme. You're going to put them in serious financial trouble." I sat back in my desk chair staring at the ceiling. "Marcus, do you know how much money I've given our family in the past 3 years? I don't know, maybe 20 or 30,000, over $200,000. Silence. "That's not possible," Marcus finally said. I opened my laptop and read him the numbers. Monthly transfers, credit card payments, insurance premiums, emergency expenses, Sarah's allowances, the cruise deposit, car payments, mortgage assistance. Line item by line item, month by month for 3 years. "Jesus Christ," Marcus whispered when I finished. "Levi, I had no idea it was that much." "Nobody did because nobody asked. You all just accepted whatever I was willing to give and then worked together to make sure I wasn't too involved in how it was being spent or what family activities it was funding. But you can't just leave them with nothing. Mom and Dad are in their 50s. They can't rebuild their savings overnight. They're not being left with nothing. They have jobs, they have the money they've actually earned, and they have each other. What they don't have anymore is access to my bank account while treating me like an inconvenient obligation. My call waiting beeped. Sarah's name appeared on the screen. I have to go, I told Marcus. Sarah's calling, and I think it's time we had a direct conversation about my role in this family. I switched to Sarah's call. What the hell is wrong with you? She screamed before I could say hello. I'm standing in Target, and my card was just declined in front of everyone. Do you have any idea how humiliating that is? Probably about as humiliating as being excluded from family vacations while paying for them, I replied. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You use money to control people. You give us help and then hold it over our heads whenever you don't get your way. Adios. I hold it over your head, Sarah. I didn't even know about the cruise until this morning. How exactly was I holding money over your head to control a decision I wasn't aware you were making? You monitor our spending. You question every expense. You make me feel like I have to justify every dollar like I'm some kind of charity case. You are a charity case. You're 29 years old and you haven't been financially independent for a single month in the past 3 years. I've been paying your rent, your groceries, your car payment, your acting classes, your headshots, and apparently your share of family vacations I'm not invited to. If that's not charity, what is it? Sue. It's family helping family. And if you can't do it without making me feel guilty and ashamed, then I don't want your help. Good, I said quietly, because you're not getting it anymore. You can't just cut us off like this. Mom and Dad depend on that money. Smucked. Mom and Dad have jobs and a house and savings. What they don't have anymore is a son who's willing to fund their lifestyle while being treated like an outsider. You are an outsider, Sarah exploded. You think you're better than all of us. You moved to Austin and got your fancy job and act like you're too good for your family. I moved 2 hours away for work and I've sent you thousands of dollars every month since I started earning decent money. How exactly does that make me too good for my family? Shiats. Because you judge us. You judge my acting career. You judge Mom and Dad for needing help. You judge everything we do. I've never said a single negative word about your acting career. You don't have to say it. I can see it in your face when I talk about auditions. You think I'm wasting my time chasing impossible dreams instead of getting a real job. I paused, trying to understand what she was really saying. Sarah, I've been financially supporting your acting career for 3 years. I've paid for headshots, acting classes, workshops, networking events. If I thought you were wasting your time, why would I spend thousands of dollars helping you pursue it? Because you want to control me. You want me to feel dependent on you so you can manipulate what I do. Is that really what you think? That I've been working extra hours and living in a modest apartment so I could manipulate you? You live in a modest apartment because you're cheap. You make 6 figures and live like you're broke because you're obsessed with hoarding money. The accusation was so backwards it left me speechless for a moment. I was cheap because I lived below my means, so I could afford to support my family's above their means lifestyle. Sarah, in the past 3 years, how much of your income have you spent on yourself versus how much of my income have you spent on yourself? Suas. That's not the point. It's exactly the point. You call me cheap for living modestly while I pay your bills. You call me controlling for asking questions about expenses on accounts that I fund. You call me judgmental for working extra hours to afford your lifestyle. And then, you convince our parents to exclude me from family events because I'm an embarrassment. You are embarrassing. You make everything about money. I make everything about money, Sarah. You just called me screaming because your credit card was declined. You're standing in Target having a breakdown because you can't charge purchases to an account that I pay for. And I'm the one who makes everything about money. She hung up. 10 minutes later, Dad called. Levi, you need to fix this right now, he said without preamble. Your mother is stranded at the grocery store, Sarah's having a panic attack in some parking lot, and I just got a text from Marcus saying you've lost your mind. I haven't lost my mind, Dad. I've just stopped paying other people's bills while they work actively to exclude me from their lives. Son, this is not how family handles disagreements. You don't punish people by cutting off financial support. I'm not punishing anyone. I'm stopping a financial arrangement that clearly wasn't working for anyone involved. You want me to be less involved in your lives? Congratulations. I'm no longer involved in your finances either. This is childish, Levi. You're acting like a spoiled brat who didn't get invited to a party. A party that I paid for Dad. A 14-day cruise charged to my credit card planned specifically to exclude me because Sarah convinced you I'm an embarrassment to the family. We can discuss the cruise situation like adults, but holding people's financial security hostage is not adult behavior. Their financial security. Dad, you have a job. Mom has a job. Sarah has been booking acting work. Your financial security doesn't depend on my credit cards unless you've been living beyond your actual means for 3 years. We've been living the way we thought we could afford with your help. And now you know what you can actually afford without it. Levi, please. Your mother is sitting in her car crying because she couldn't pay for groceries. Is that really what you want? The guilt hit like a punch to the stomach. Despite everything, the thought of Mom crying in a parking lot made me feel terrible. But then I remembered the cruise booking, the secret group chats, the months of lies about Marcus being deployed. Mom knew about that cruise booking 6 weeks ago. She knew I was being excluded while paying for the vacation. She went along with lies about Marcus being deployed. She helped plan family dinners and events that I wasn't invited to while I continued sending monthly checks. So yes, if she's crying because she can't use my credit card to buy groceries, that is exactly what I want. I want her to understand what it feels like to face consequences for her choices. You're being cruel, son. I'm being honest. For the first time in 3 years, I'm being completely honest about what this relationship actually is. You want my money, but you don't want me. And I'm no longer willing to pretend that's acceptable. I hung up and turned off my phone. For the first time in 3 years, I was completely disconnected from my family's financial crises, emotional manipulation, and guilt tactics. The silence felt both terrifying and liberating. But I had one more discovery to make that would change everything I thought I knew about Sarah's role in this situation. I kept my phone off for the rest of the day, but by morning I had 47 missed calls and 63 text messages. The preview snippets I could see without opening them ranged from angry to desperate to manipulative. You're destroying this family over a misunderstanding. Mom hasn't stopped crying since yesterday. I hope you're proud of yourself. Please call me back, we can fix this. But it was a call from an unknown number that finally made me turn my phone back on. Is this Levi Harrison? The voice was professional female. Yes. This is Detective Amanda Chen with the Austin Police Department's Financial Crimes Division. We need to speak with you about some fraudulent activity on your credit accounts. My blood went cold. What kind of fraudulent activity? According to our investigation, someone has been using your personal information to open unauthorized accounts and make significant purchases. We have several instances of identity theft and credit fraud that we need to discuss with you in person. 2 hours later, I was sitting in a sterile conference room at the police station, staring at documents that made my family's emotional betrayal look insignificant compared to what Sarah had actually been doing. The first fraudulent account was opened 8 months ago, Detective Chen explained, spreading papers across the table. A business credit line for something called Spotlight Productions, LLC. The application listed you as a co-signer and guarantor with your social security number and employment information. I stared at the signature on the document. It looked like mine, but I'd never signed anything related to Spotlight Productions. This account has a balance of $37,000, Detective Chen continued. All charges appear to be related to entertainment industry expenses, equipment rentals, location fees, catering services, editing software subscriptions. I've never heard of Spotlight Productions, I said slowly. According to the business registration, we found it's a production company founded by Sarah Michelle Harrison. Your sister. The room seemed to tilt. My sister forged my signature to open a business credit line. That's what the evidence suggests, but there's more. Detective Chen pulled out another stack of documents. Second mortgage on your parents' property listing you as a co-borrower. $45,000 line of credit. The signature matches the one from the business account. I felt sick. When was this opened? 4 months ago. The interesting thing is that your parents don't appear to know about this second mortgage. When we contacted the lender to verify the application information they told us, the borrower specifically requested that all correspondence be sent to a P.O. box rather than the property address. Sarah had taken out a second mortgage on our parents' house using my credit and identity, and she'd hidden it from them. There are also 3 credit cards opened in your name over the past 6 months, Detective Chen continued. Combined balance of $22,000, all linked to addresses associated with your sister. I was looking at over $100,000 in fraudulent debt that Sarah had accumulated using my identity, on top of the $200,000 I'd willingly provided over the past 3 years. How did you discover this? I asked. One of the credit card companies flagged unusual activity and ran a routine check. When they tried to verify recent charges with you, the phone number on file went to your sister's voicemail. That triggered an investigation. So Sarah's been stealing my identity to fund her production company while I've been voluntarily giving her an allowance every month. It appears so. We've also found evidence that she's been running similar scams on other family members and friends. The production company appears to be completely fictitious. No legitimate business activity, no tax filings, no employees other than herself. I thought about all the times Sarah had mentioned investors and business meetings and networking opportunities that required new clothes or equipment or travel expenses. She'd been building a fake production company using stolen identities and fraudulent credit. What happens now? I asked. We need you to file a formal report for identity theft and credit fraud. We'll also need you to contact each of the creditors to dispute the charges and begin the process of removing your liability for these accounts. And Sarah will be issuing a warrant for her arrest on multiple counts of identity theft, credit fraud, and forgery. Given the amounts involved and the systematic nature of the crimes, she's looking at serious federal charges. I left the police station 3 hours later with a thick folder of documents and a court date for the following week. Sarah hadn't just been emotionally manipulating our family. She'd been committing serious financial crimes using my identity while playing the victim who needed protection from my controlling behavior. But the real shock was still waiting for me at home. My phone had been buzzing constantly during the police interview. When I finally checked it, most of the messages were from my parents, increasingly frantic as the day wore on. But there were also several from neighbors, family, friends, and people I hadn't spoken to in years. The messages all said variations of the same thing. Saw the news about your family, so sorry this happened. I opened Facebook and searched for my family's names. What I found made me understand just how deep Sarah's manipulation had gone. Sarah had posted a long emotional status update that morning, complete with photos from our childhood and dramatic language about toxic family dynamics and financial abuse. I finally found the courage to speak my truth about the psychological manipulation I've endured from my brother for the past 3 years. Her post began. What started as family help became a tool for control, isolation, and emotional abuse. Yesterday, he cut off all financial support to our entire family, including our elderly parents, because I had the courage to set boundaries around his toxic behavior. The post went on for several paragraphs, painting me as a controlling manipulator who used money to isolate family members and punish anyone who challenged my authority. She described the cruise exclusion as her desperate attempt to create space for healing, and my financial response as economic terrorism against vulnerable family members. But the most devastating part was the response. Over 200 comments from friends, extended family, and acquaintances, all expressing support for Sarah and condemning me for financial abuse and abandoning family in need. My own cousin Ashley had commented, "I always knew something was wrong with Levi's attitude about money. Sarah, you're so brave for speaking out." My high school friend Jake, "Can't believe someone would cut off their own parents like that. Sorry you're going through this, Sarah." Even my grandmother's neighbor, "Your poor parents. How could their own son do this to them?" Sarah had turned my decision to stop enabling their lifestyle into a public relations campaign that painted her as a victim and me as an abuser, and people who had known me my entire life were buying it. I screenshotted everything before calling Marcus. "Have you seen Facebook?" I asked when he answered. "Yeah, I saw it. Levi, what she's posting isn't true, and I'm going to comment and set the record straight. Don't. It'll just make it worse. But there's something you need to know about Sarah's business activities. I spent 20 minutes explaining the police investigation, the fraudulent accounts, and the criminal charges Sarah would be facing. Marcus listened in stunned silence. A fake production company, he finally asked. Using my stolen identity and credit. She's been running a scam operation while playing the victim of my financial control. Jesus, do Mom and Dad know? Not yet. And they're about to find out they have a second mortgage on their house that they didn't sign for. This is insane. Sarah's been lying to everyone about everything. It gets worse, I said, and told him about the social media campaign. She's trying to destroy your reputation before the criminal charges become public, Marcus realized. If everyone thinks you're an abuser, they won't believe you when the fraud story comes out. It's working. Half our hometown thinks I'm a monster who abandoned his family out of spite. We have to tell people the truth. The truth is complicated. The fraud is easy to understand. Sarah stole my identity and committed serious crimes. But the family dynamics, the exclusion, the manipulation, all of that just makes me look petty in comparison. That evening, my parents called from Marcus's apartment, where they'd gone after being evicted from their house for defaulting on mortgage payments they couldn't afford without my support. Levi, Mom said, her voice hollow, Marcus told us about the police investigation. I'm sorry you had to find out this way. How long have you known? Dad asked. I found out this morning when the detective called me. So when you cut off our accounts yesterday, you didn't know about Sarah's crimes? No, I cut off your accounts because you excluded me from the family while using my money to pay for the exclusion. Silence. We didn't know, Mom whispered finally. About the fraud, about how much money you'd actually given us, about what Sarah was really doing. We thought we were protecting her feelings, but she was using us to hurt you. And herself, Dad added quietly. She's destroyed her own life with these lies. What happens now? Mom asked. Now you get your own phone plan, your own credit cards, and your own financial independence, I said. And you decide whether you want a relationship with me based on something other than my bank account. If Frank's dad said, we want to make this right. Then start by taking responsibility for your own choices instead of blaming Sarah for manipulating you. You're adults. You chose to believe lies instead of talking to me directly. You chose to exclude me from family events while accepting my money. You chose to enable Sarah's behavior for months while she was committing crimes. Own those choices. The hardest part wasn't the money or the fraud or even the family betrayal. The hardest part was realizing that I'd spent 3 years trying to buy love from people who were perfectly willing to sell it to me while keeping the actual relationship out of reach. But I was about to learn that the story wasn't over yet. The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind of legal proceedings, family drama, and public humiliation that tested every principle I'd ever held about forgiveness and family loyalty. Sarah was arrested on a Tuesday morning at her apartment in Los Angeles. The charges were extensive identity theft, credit fraud, forgery, wire fraud, and conspiracy. The fake production company had been her most elaborate scheme. But investigators had uncovered a pattern of financial crimes stretching back over 2 years. The arrest made local news in both Los Angeles and our hometown. Local woman arrested in identity theft scheme. Read the headline in our hometown paper. The article included Sarah's mugshot and a brief description of the charges, but it didn't mention that I was the primary victim or that our family had been publicly accusing me of financial abuse. Meanwhile, my parents were learning to navigate financial independence for the first time in 3 years. Without my monthly transfers, they had to dramatically downsize their lifestyle. They moved from their 4-bedroom house to a small 2-bedroom apartment. Dad sold his truck and bought a used sedan. Mom canceled her spa memberships and salon appointments. The adjustment was harder than any of us had expected, not just financially, but emotionally. They'd become accustomed to a standard of living that required my subsidies, and returning to what they could actually afford felt like poverty, even though it was perfectly middle class. I feel like such a fool, Mom told me during one of our awkward weekly phone calls. For 3 years, I thought we were just going through a rough patch and you were helping us get back on our feet. I didn't realize we were living beyond our means permanently. You weren't living beyond your means, I corrected her. You were living beyond your income. There's a difference. I don't understand. Your means include what you can afford with your own resources. Your income is just your salary. You were living a lifestyle that matched my income instead of yours. The distinction seemed to hit her hard. So we were never actually middle class anymore. We were poor people pretending to be middle class with your money. You were people adjusting to a temporary financial setback who got comfortable living on someone else's credit instead of rebuilding your own stability. Dad had an even harder time with the transition. His pride had been wrapped up in being able to provide for his family and discovering that he'd been accepting financial support while excluding me from family life made him feel like a failure as both a provider and a father. I should have known something was wrong, he told me during a visit to his new apartment. When Sarah insisted you didn't want to come to family dinners, I should have called you myself instead of taking her word for it. Why didn't you? He was quiet for a long time. Because it was easier to believe her version. If you were too busy or too uncomfortable to join us, then I didn't have to feel guilty about accepting your money while you worked all the time. Sarah's story made it seem like you were choosing to keep your distance, which meant I could enjoy the lifestyle your support provided without feeling like I was taking advantage of you. The honesty was brutal but necessary. Marcus became my strongest ally during this period, actively working to repair our family relationships, while holding everyone accountable for their choices. He got a job with a local construction company and moved in with our parents to help with their transition to affordable housing. I've been thinking about the deployment lies, he told me one evening. I convinced myself that going along with Sarah's story was protecting you from feeling obligated to spend time with family when you were busy with work. But really, I was protecting myself from having to explain why I was avoiding you. Why were you avoiding me? Because every time I saw you, I felt guilty about taking your money. Sarah made it easy to avoid that guilt by convincing me you preferred the distance. So everyone was avoiding uncomfortable conversations by letting Sarah manage the family narrative. Exactly, and she used that to isolate you while committing crimes with your identity. The most difficult part was watching Sarah's life unravel. The legal proceedings revealed the full extent of her deception. She'd been running credit scams not just on me, but on several of her Los Angeles friends. She'd convinced aspiring actors to invest in her fake production company, stealing thousands of dollars from people who were already struggling financially. But Sarah wasn't going down quietly. From jail, she continued to maintain her innocence and blame me for her situation. In a jailhouse interview with a local reporter, she claimed the identity theft charges were retaliation for her exposing my financial abuse of the family. My brother has been controlling our family through money for years, she said. When I finally found the courage to speak out, he used his connections to have me falsely arrested. This is what happens when you challenge someone who thinks money makes them untouchable. The interview made me furious, not just because of the lies, but because some people actually believed her version of events. The comments on the news station's Facebook page were split between people calling her a criminal and people defending her as a victim of my revenge. But then something unexpected happened. People who actually knew me started speaking up. My high school guidance counselor, Mrs. Rodriguez, posted a long comment defending my character and questioning Sarah's narrative. My former boss at my first job wrote about my integrity and work ethic. Neighbors who'd known our family for years began sharing their own observations about the family dynamics they'd witnessed. The most powerful testimony came from my college roommate David, who posted a detailed account of how I'd talked about my family during our 4 years together. Levi worked 2 part-time jobs in college so he could send money home when his family needed help, David wrote. I watched him skip meals so he could afford to help with his sister's acting expenses. I watched him stress about his family's financial problems and work extra hours during breaks to earn money he could send them. If this guy is a financial abuser, then I'm a purple elephant. Sarah's story doesn't match the person I lived with for 4 years. Slowly, the narrative began to shift. People started questioning why someone who'd been financially supporting his family for 3 years would suddenly become abusive. The criminal charges against Sarah made her victim story less believable. But the most important change was happening within my family. My parents were learning to live within their actual means and discovering that they could be happy without the lifestyle my money had provided. Dad started enjoying his new job with the construction company, finding satisfaction in earning his own paycheck again. Mom joined a book club at the local library and made new friends who didn't know anything about our family's financial drama. I forgot what it felt like to be proud of my own accomplishments, Dad told me during a visit. For 3 years, everything good in our lives came from your work, not ours. We lost ourselves in your success. The breakthrough moment came when my parents invited me to dinner at their new apartment. It was the first family gathering I'd been included in since the previous Christmas, and the first one that wasn't funded by my credit card. Mom cooked a simple meal with ingredients they'd bought with their own money. Dad showed me around their small apartment with genuine pride in what they could afford on their own. Marcus brought dessert from a local bakery paid for with his own paycheck. We talked about everything except money. Dad's new co-workers, Mom's book club, Marcus's plans to start his own construction business, my latest projects at work. It was the most normal family conversation we'd had in years. "This feels different," Mom said as we cleared the dinner dishes together. "Different how?" "Honest. Like we're actually family instead of people connected by financial transactions." "We were always family," I said. "But for the past 3 years, we were also a business relationship that was slowly destroying the family part." "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I'm sorry we let money become more important than our actual relationship with you. I'm sorry too. I think I used money as a way to feel needed and important in the family instead of building real connections." "What happens now?" Dad asked, joining us in the kitchen. "Now we figure out how to be family without any financial strings attached. You live your lives, I live mine, and we spend time together because we want to, not because anyone owes anyone anything." "And Sarah? Sarah needs to face the consequences of her choices and decide what kind of person she wants to be when she gets out of jail. But that's her decision to make." As I drove home that night, I realized something had fundamentally shifted. For the first time in 3 years, I felt like I had a family again, instead of a group of dependents. It wasn't the same relationship we'd had before the financial support began, but it was healthier and more honest than what we'd been pretending was normal. The money was gone, the lies were exposed, and the manipulation was over. What remained was the possibility of rebuilding genuine relationships based on mutual respect instead of financial dependence. But the most important lesson was still to come. 6 months after cutting off my family's financial support, I was sitting in a courtroom watching Sarah plead guilty to multiple counts of identity theft and fraud. She'd been offered a plea deal that would reduce her sentence in exchange for admitting guilt and paying restitution to her victims. The judge sentenced her to 18 months in federal prison, followed by 2 years of supervised probation and community service. She would also have to pay back over $100,000 in fraudulent charges, though the judge acknowledged it would likely take her years to fulfill that obligation. As she was led away in handcuffs, Sarah looked back at our family sitting in the gallery. Mom was crying quietly. Dad stared straight ahead with his jaw set. Marcus squeezed my shoulder supportively. I felt a complicated mix of sadness, relief, and something approaching forgiveness. "How do you feel?" Marcus asked as we left the courthouse. "Like the worst part is finally over," I said. "Now the real work begins." The real work was rebuilding our family relationships on a foundation of honesty instead of financial dependence. It was harder than I'd expected, but also more rewarding than the superficial connections money had created. My parents adapted to their new financial reality better than anyone had predicted. Dad's construction work kept him busy and gave him pride in earning his own way again. Mom discovered she enjoyed the challenge of budgeting and found creative ways to maintain social connections without expensive activities. "We're actually happier now," Mom told me during one of our monthly dinners. "I didn't realize how much stress I was carrying about accepting your money while excluding you from our lives. The guilt was eating at me, but I didn't know how to fix it without admitting what we'd done." "You fixed it by taking responsibility and changing the pattern," I said. No. You fixed it by refusing to enable our bad behavior anymore. If you'd kept sending money while we excluded you, we would have kept taking it and kept feeling guilty and kept letting Sarah manipulate the situation. The most surprising relationship to heal was with Marcus. Without the financial complications and Sarah's manipulation, we rediscovered how much we genuinely enjoyed each other's company. He started visiting me in Austin regularly, and we began planning a hiking trip to Colorado for the following summer. I missed having a brother, he told me one evening as we watched a Rangers game at a local bar. For 3 years, you felt more like a distant uncle who sent checks than someone I could hang out with. I missed having a family that wanted me around for something other than my bank account. We always wanted you around. We just got confused about how to separate your generosity from your presence. Sarah convinced us that appreciating your financial help meant giving you space from family obligations. And I confused providing financial help with buying love and acceptance. Did it work? Marcus asked with a grin. Obviously not. The more money I sent, the more excluded I became. Lesson learned. Lesson learned. Sarah's re-entry into our lives was the most complicated part of the healing process. She served 14 months of her sentence and was released on good behavior. The woman who came out of prison was different from the one who'd gone in. Quieter, more reflective. Genuinely remorseful in a way her previous apologies had never been. "I need to apologize to you," she said during our first conversation after her release. We met at a coffee shop halfway between Austin and our hometown with Marcus there as a buffer. "I appreciate that," I said carefully. "I don't mean just for the identity theft, although that was inexcusable. I mean for the emotional manipulation, the lies, the way I turned our family against you while you were supporting all of us." "What changed?" Marcus asked. "Prison gives you a lot of time to think, and mandatory therapy gives you tools to understand your own behavior. I spent months trying to justify what I'd done, but eventually I had to face the truth about my choices. Which was, I was jealous of your success, Levi. Insanely, destructively jealous. Instead of dealing with those feelings or working to build my own success, I decided to tear you down. I convinced myself that you were controlling and judgmental because it was easier than admitting I was failing. And the identity theft started as desperation and became a compulsion. Every time I created a new account or forged another signature, I told myself it was temporary. Just until my acting career took off or my production company became real. But there was never going to be a production company. I was just stealing from you to fund a fantasy life. The conversation was painful but necessary. Sarah was facing the long process of rebuilding her life from scratch with a criminal record that would make employment difficult and debt that would take years to repay. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she said. "I don't expect you to trust me or include me in your life. I just wanted you to know that I understand what I did and I'm committed to making amends however I can." "Making amends looks like what?" I asked. "Paying restitution even if it takes decades. Taking responsibility for my actions without making excuses. Rebuilding my life through honest work instead of scams and manipulation. And never ever using family relationships to hurt people again." It took another year for me to feel comfortable including Sarah in family gatherings, and even now, 3 years later, our relationship is still fragile. But she's kept her word about taking responsibility. She works 2 jobs to pay her restitution and living expenses. She's never asked me for money or tried to manipulate family situations to her advantage. Most importantly, she's never again tried to interfere with my relationships with our parents or Marcus. The experience taught me several life-changing lessons about family money and boundaries. First, financial generosity without boundaries isn't generosity at all. It's enabling. When I provided unlimited support without expectations or accountability, I wasn't helping my family become stronger or more independent. I was making them dependent on me while simultaneously removing myself from their actual lives. Second, using money to feel needed and important in relationships creates artificial connections that crowd out genuine intimacy. The more essential my financial support became, the less essential my actual presence was to my family's happiness and functioning. Third, family relationships must be based on mutual respect and shared values, not financial transactions. When money becomes the primary connection between family members, it corrupts every other aspect of the relationship. But the most important lesson was about the difference between helping people and enabling people. Helping people means supporting them as they develop their own capability and independence. Enabling people means removing the natural consequences of their choices so they never have to develop responsibility or self-sufficiency. For 3 years, I thought I was helping my family. In reality, I was enabling them to avoid the work of rebuilding their financial stability while rewarding them for excluding me from their emotional lives. The healthiest thing I ever did for my family was cutting off their access to my money. It forced them to confront their actual financial situation, take responsibility for their choices, and decide what kind of relationships they wanted with me, based on something other than my ability to subsidize their lifestyle. Today, my family relationships are smaller but infinitely more genuine than they were when I was funding everyone's life. We have dinner together once a month, split the cost equally, and talk about our real lives instead of financial crises and manipulation strategies. Dad is proud of the construction business he's building with Marcus. Mom has started teaching literacy classes at the community center and discovered a passion for helping others that doesn't involve my credit card. Marcus and I are planning that Colorado hiking trip we never got around to taking. And Sarah is slowly rebuilding her life through honest work and genuine relationships instead of scams and emotional manipulation. We're not the same family we were before the financial crisis, but we're a healthier family than we ever were during the 3 years of financial dependence. I learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for family is refuse to enable their destructive patterns, even when they paint you as the villain for setting boundaries. Real love requires honesty, accountability, and respect. Financial manipulation, no matter how it's disguised, is the opposite of love. True strength isn't measured by how much you can give others, but by your willingness to maintain your values and boundaries, even when others try to guilt you into abandoning them. Family relationships that can't survive honest boundaries aren't really family relationships at all. They're just business arrangements dressed up with emotional manipulation. The money I spent supporting my family for 3 years wasn't wasted, even though much of it was stolen or misused. It taught me valuable lessons about dependency manipulation and the difference between genuine generosity and people-pleasing disguised as love. Most importantly, it taught me that protecting yourself from exploitation doesn't make you selfish. It makes you honest. And honest relationships, even when they're smaller and more complicated than artificial ones, are always worth protecting. I hope my story helps anyone who's found themselves in a similar situation. Has there ever been a time when you had to choose between maintaining relationships and protecting your own well-being? How did you handle family members who confused your generosity with an obligation to accept poor treatment? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like to help others who might be struggling with similar family dynamics find it. Consider subscribing for more real-life stories about navigating difficult relationships and life challenges. And if you know someone who could benefit from hearing about setting boundaries with family members, please share this story with them. Thank you for listening to my story and supporting honest conversations about the complicated realities of family relationships. Remember that taking care of yourself isn't selfish. It's necessary. You can't pour from an empty cup, and you can't build healthy relationships on a foundation of manipulation and guilt. Take care of yourselves, set those boundaries, and remember that the people who truly love you will respect your limits instead of trying to manipulate you into abandoning them.